Good evening. This is October 5th, 2020. I hope everybody's had a good day. Today marks the 26th anniversary of the death of a friend. His name was Walter Key Williams. He was also known as Abdullah Hashim. He was born on January 30th, 1962, and he worked as a laborer, and I think the last job he had was as a convenience store clerk. He was from San Antonio, Texas. On February 11, 1981, he was convicted of the murder of the San Antonio convenience store clerk Daniel Leopold. He allegedly shot him in the back with a 38 caliber pistol during a robbery attempt at a Circle K food store where he had worked for about a year. At the trial, eyewitnesses testified they saw him and his accomplice, Theodore Roosevelt Edwards, in the store at the time of the robbery. Prosecutors introduced confessions signed by him 8 hours after the crime. Authorities found the gun used in the store robbery at his parents' home on a nightstand next to the bed where he was sleeping. He had married at the age of 17 but was separated from his wife when the crime took place. And he took home about $180 a week as a store clerk. And he knew the victim casually. He was later convicted of murder, or rather Edwards, his accomplice, was convicted of another murder and another robbery and sentenced to life imprisonment. He was received, Walter Key Williams was on death row September 3rd, 1982. And it was in the 1990s that I met him. I was living in Waco. A friend brought by a copy of a newspaper called Endeavor, which was published at the time on behalf of the death row community in Huntsville, and they do have a community, I can assure you that. A lot of camaraderie and solidarity, in some ways better than what you find in the free world. There were a number of inmates that I found their names, numbers, and addresses listed in Endeavor, and I wrote them letters. And Brother Hashim wrote me back. And we carried on a correspondence for a few years. Because of his adopted name, as I suspected, he was a Muslim. And we discussed various things related to Islam, Christianity, criminal justice, and many other matters. And I recall, I think it was in January 1991, he wrote a letter and observed that he thought it was strange that the King of Saudi Arabia was involved with America in Operation Desert Storm and was launching a war so close to the holy month of Ramadan. I was in the PhD program at Baylor at the time, studying world religions, and I sent him some articles and information. He expressed an interest in learning Arabic. I did have an Arabic textbook in my library, which I got the Baylor bookstore to mail to him. At least at that time, I don't know how it is now, but anything that a prisoner received had to come from either a bookstore or a publisher, not from an individual. And so they sent it to him. And we had some interesting correspondence during the next few years. He it was in one of the articles I sent him was The Great Litigation Revisited, an article I wrote back in 1985 concerning the court cases involving the Prince Hall Shriners when the white Shriners were trying to put them out of business. Today, the two imperial councils have very good relationships. In fact, June 3rd is celebrated as Jubilee Day, and the Imperial Council of Shrine International sent a letter this year to the Imperial Council for Prince Hall, congratulating them on the victory, recognizing, even though they were on the other side of it, that their forebears were in the wrong. But Abdullah Hashim, aka Walter Key Williams, seemed to be quite perceptive about things. And he said he thought that if the ancient Arabic order, nobles of the mystic shrine, wished to build a righteous society, they would welcome help from the ancient Egyptian Arabic order, nobles of the mystic shrine, who had the same goal. But that was the 14-year period from 1914 till 15-year period, 1914 and 1929, which they battled in court until June 3rd of 1929. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that black men had the right to wear the fez and call themselves nobles of the mystic shrine. And I agree, it's incredible. If anybody wants to build a righteous society, they should welcome help from others with similar goals. But throughout history, it's often not been the case. I remember on Tuesday, April the 20th, 1993, receiving a letter in the mail from him. Since he knew I lived in Waco, he says he knows Waco, they've been in the news a lot. Trouble going on in your neck of the woods about the Branch Davidians. Hope it all ends peacefully. Unfortunately, it didn't. In fact, it was just the day before I received the letter. April 19th, 1993 is when the compound burned down, and at least 76 lives were lost. Abdullah Hashim knew some of the same prisoners that I knew, and he said if he ever got out of prison, he'd try to become part of a mosque. And he mentioned about, asking what kind of work he did, he mentioned about being a store clerk. Well, his appeals finally ran out, and he was executed on October 5th, 1994. At the time, Ann Richards was governor of Texas. She was facing very strong competition from George W. Bush, and Bush ended up winning the election. And it didn't take a genius to figure out that a stay of execution approximately 30 days before an election would amount to political suicide. Ann Richards had disappointed me in so many ways. I, like many others, was quite hopeful when she became governor that she'd really bring some changes to the state. I was disappointed when she was in a debate with, this is in the Democratic primary, with former Governor Mark White, then Attorney General Jim Maddox, and she was at the time serving as state treasurer. And a number of people had been circulating the word that she was opposed to the death penalty. And she stated she was not. And some people I know who's opposed the death penalty were willing to look over that. Because, when she was asked one time by a reporter what would she do if the state legislature abolished the death penalty, she said, "I'd faint." That's not funny. 49 people died under her watch. And to my knowledge, she never expressed any regret prior to death in 2006. But my friend's last words were he wished he had spent his entire life as Islamic and had thus, he didn't convert until he went to prison. And many people make jailhouse conversions, be it to Christianity, to Islam, or some other faith. And many observe the fact that they got the religion at an earlier time, they could have avoided whatever they did that made them end up in prison in the first place. And there's some truth in that. But it was on the day before the execution. I made a trip to Huntsville and had a last visit with him. We talked for a good while. And he said that our visit was helpful to him, and I'm thankful for that fact. I had a file on him, I'm sure I still do, but all the moves I've made over the years, I can't put my finger on every file that I have. I do remember receiving a copy of the Journal of the American Bar Association. There was a woman currently serving as editor of the Bar Journal at the time who witnessed the execution and wrote an article about it, which was very interesting. I have that in that file. But it's been 26 years. I miss my friend. And I hope we will live to see the day in which the death penalty is abolished. Things have turned around to an extent that everywhere it's no longer political suicide to oppose the death penalty. it doesn't have the support it once had. Even in Texas, there's not as many executions as there once was, nor new death sentences as there once was. This was the case even before the coronavirus. I love you, brother. Peace. Be still.